please the court, my name is Ryan Caldwell for the appellant, or excuse me, the appellee, Curtis Weatherholt.
Excuse me, I started at the top of the list.
I take no offense, Judge.
All right.
I think the key that we need to take a look at is what needed to be proved and what the burden that Ms. Starks had to prove. And that was a legitimate reason for leaving the state of Nebraska, and whether the best interest of the child was met by moving to Washington.
Would you agree that the court in its order, I guess the letter attached to the order, really didn't get to that issue, the first threshold issue of legitimate reason, until the end of the court's analysis?
I would agree that the court did wait till the very end to give us its analysis on that, but I believe the reason was because it kind of was associated with the best interest of the child with regard to the motivation of the mother for removing. The Supreme Court in Vogel v. Vogel stated that marriage may be a legitimate reason for moving from the state. And that keyword "may," I think, is what we should focus on, because I believe it provides the trial court with some kind of discretion to determine whether the marriage is the reason for the removal, or if it's used as a means or a tool for removing the child, which I believe happened in this circumstance. I think the facts point out that this was a quick marriage that happened very quickly after said he didn't want to have anything to do with the mother any longer, and that Ms. Starks also provided some statements stating that her intention was to remove Gage, get him away from Mr. Weatherholt, and that the marriage would help her financially get her set.
Do you think it's appropriate for a court to look into the motivations for a person to marry and determine whether it's a legitimate marriage or a sham marriage?
I don't think it needs to go that far, but I believe there should be some kind of discretion to determine whether the purpose of the marriage was to specifically do the removal, which it seems like it happened in this case. I can't really give you any type of specifics on what is a justified marriage or a legitimate marriage, because I don't really think that's the basis, whether they're in love or not. I guess that's up for the trial court to determine. And I think the trial court did determine that they didn't believe that this marriage was particularly forthright when it pertained to Gage, and it was specifically to remove Gage from Washington. But regardless of whether there was a legitimate reason or not, the trial court even stated that Ms. Starks failed to overcome her burden of establishing a best interest for the child. There is a pretty lengthy analysis in the findings that are attached to the decree, and it appears from that analysis that the court only found two items that benefited removal to Washington, and that was that there was some kind of financial benefit to Ms. Starks by not having to have two separate homes, and then the benefit of living with her husband. However, on the opposite side, against removal, the court didn't find that being in Washington provided any employment or educational enhancement. There was no evidence to suggest that by moving to Washington that Ms. Starks would be provided a better education or better opportunities at employment or income. The court was also concerned that removing the child from Nebraska, where his immediate family resides, would harm the quality of life of the child. The court also was concerned that it didn't believe that the proposed visitation schedule that Ms. Starks provided was meaningful to the child and to the father-son relationship. I believe the proposal was 1 week in the fall, 1 week in the winter, 1 week in the spring, and 2 weeks in the summer, and didn't account for things like Father's Day or birthdays or extended holidays and things like that. And then finally, the court, and this kind of ties back to the beginning of the legitimate reason for removal, but the court, I believe, found that the motive of Ms. Starks was to harm Mr. Weatherholt by removing the child from Nebraska. And that motivation is one of the issues that we take a look at to determine whether there is a reason or that is the best interest for the children. Unless there's any further questions, I conclude my argument. Thank you.
Thank you. think council has rebuttal time.
Yes, 5 minutes.
Okay.